kind of protocols and those sorts of things. So that's kind of the roots of this work, and that's all I've got for now.
All right.
Mhm.
So here's the dude, A.T. Still, who is considered the father of American osteopathy. I'm not sure. It seems like osteopathy should have a mother too, but maybe maybe his daughter would qualify. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Blanche.
Blanche,
His
yeah,
daughter
Blanche
Blanche.
Laughlin.
Yeah.
And so we want to set the stage for this form of indigenous bodywork. And I'll begin by telling you how I learned it. So I grew up receiving it, um, and at least until my great grandmother died. And um, and when I got to medical school, I was a little freaked out by the incredible emphasis on biomedicine and the lack of any discussion of healing. And so I after a particularly difficult lecture by the guy who invented the metabolic syndrome, Gerald Revens, I ran over to the Stanford Indian Center and I burst through the door, and there was Henrietta Blue Eyes on the desk. And I said, Henrietta, I need an elder. And she said, what tribe? And I said, Cherokee, because at that time I didn't know my father was Lakota. And she pulled out that archaic instrument called a Rolodex and found two names, um, Gidla in Ukiah, California, and Grandfather Roberts in Garberville, California. And so I connected with them and I received this form of work. And then later in my life, they referred me to people they knew in Oakland, California, with whom I started learning. And then when I moved to Tucson, those guys referred me to friends of theirs in Tucson with whom I learned. And so I was just interested in learning this type of hands on work. And so I was diligent, I learned. And one day I was teaching it, and someone came to class and they said, oh, where did you learn osteopathy? And I said, what's that? And they said, what you're doing. And I said, I'm not doing osteopathy. I never heard of osteopathy. They said, yes, you are. And so I thought, Cherokee Bodywork, osteopathy, looks alike. There must be some correspondence. And that began an exploration, which quickly included Josie, for the indigenous roots of American osteopathy, which is something we've been at for maybe 5 years. And I think we're almost ready to publish a paper on it. It's almost done. We almost got it done in October, but we ran out of time. So we'll have to revisit it shortly. But so it turned out that when Andrew Taylor Still went into the woods and came out with osteopathy, there were Indians in the woods. Imagine that. People lived in the woods. Who knew? So, um, so we're really talking about Still's interaction with people in with the indigenous people of Missouri in the 1850s and 1860s, which would have been the Cherokee, the Shawnee, the Pawnee, and the Kickapoo. And this picture is the Wakarusa Mission in eastern Kansas, which was on Shawnee land. And of course, um, the stories are terrible, and we'll share a few with you of land grabbing and stealing and all that, betrayal of treaties. Um, But anyway, before we go any further, we want to thank the original people of the land where we are, which is the Wabanaki Confederation, which consists of the Maliseet, the Mi'kmaq, the Passamaquoddy, the Penobscot, and the Abenaki. And we also want to pay homage to all of the tribes of Missouri and Kansas who interacted with Still, and anyone else who was involved. So we can't burn anything because we're in a hotel presenting this to you since we don't have anywhere else to go. But should we sing a song, Barb? So we want to sing a song because that's what we do. Usually we burn sage and pass it around the room. Uh, but it's hard to send sage across the internet, and it's hard to burn it in hotel rooms. Yeah. So, so we want to sing a song for you. Do you want to sing the tree song? Okay. Way ya ya, way oh hey, way hi ya hey ya ya, way oh hey, way hi ya hey ya, way hi ya hey ya ya, way oh hey. Tunkashila wamayan kayo he le mie cha nawajielo he wamayan kayo le mie cha nawajielo he. Way, ya, ya, way, oh, hey. Way, hi, ya, hey, ya, ya, way, oh, hey. Way, hi, ya, hey, ya. Way, hi, ya,
Yeah.
hey, ya, ya, way, oh, hey. Tunkashila wamayan kayo he le mie cha nawajielo he wamayan kayo le mie cha nawajielo he. Oh, mitakiasi. So that's a song that honors the tree, and it says, great, big big spirits, take a look at us, take a look at me. We're standing here, standing alone before you, as the tree does in the Sundance. Take a look at me. And the tree, trees are the antenna that connect the earth and the sky. Trees are the conduit between the earth and the sky. And so trees are very sacred, and which is why uh, the center of the Sundance is a tree. And so we love that song, which is sung when the tree enters the Sundance grounds. But it also reminds us of the incredible importance of trees. That without trees, there would be no life on Earth. So, and also I'm partial to the song because of having gone to Stanford, whose motto is "Fear the tree." So anyway, Philip maybe gets that joke, but probably no one else who's not in California would really understand what I just said. So anyway, go Stanford, beat Berkeley. And moving on. So we're going to talk about, we want to talk about H.C. Still a little bit because we think it's really important that people understand that American osteopathy came from indigenous people. that it was a direct transmission of knowledge from the Cherokee, the Pawnee, the Shawnee, and the Kickapoo to Andrew Taylor Still, who homogenized it and packaged it and presented it to the Anglophone world. And so we feel that it's really important to ground osteopathy in its indigenous origins. And so here's Still playing with the skeleton. And I just want to say a little bit about, I learned this in an apprentice situation. I learned it in the tradition of see one, do one, teach one. And, the way I learned it was to just hang out with these people who were doing it. And, they didn't have fancy offices. They did it out of their homes. They had a bedroom devoted to the work. And mostly it was for their own community. And people made donations. I don't really know how much people donated. I do know that if they thought someone was being a cheapskate, that they wouldn't work with them. I also know that they worked with people who gave them one cigarette. So, there was some discernment about what people could afford to present. And I know that when I was in Arizona, one of my donations to them was to put in a swamp cooler in their house, which was not a simple feat. So, so I gave also in order to learn this. And and the way I was taught, was to just work with them and to see what, to feel and see what they were doing and to put my hands on theirs and just pick it up, absorb it, because that's really a key way that one receives indigenous knowledge. And hands-on work is rampant across North America. The Aztec do hands-on work, the Apache, Zuni do they do high velocity adjustment of necks like chiropractors. Um, it's rampant across the world. You know, um, Everyone has heard of Lomi Lomi because in its watered down version, it's been popularized in resorts in Hawaii. Having had the real Lomi Lomi from native Hawaiians, I can tell you that what they do in resorts is nothing compared to the real Magilla. And of course, there's Thai massage, which is indigenous Thai practice, and Maori bodywork, which apparently, according to our friend Adrian, who's Maori and has received it, it's so painful that people have to hold you down while you're getting it. So I don't know. I haven't had it, but we have heard rumors of 200-kilo Maoris sitting on people and rolling on them. And when they recovered from the concussion, their life was changed, and they were never the same, but in a good way. So I can't speak to the ethics of rolling on people when you weigh 200 kilo, but apparently it works. So there's Maori massage. So the whole
Save
world. Yes,
your rest that way.
right, right. Yeah. Well, our friend Wiramu, I, he's probably at least 200 kilos, and I could imagine him rolling on someone. So who knows?
Oh.
But so touch healing is ancient. It's historical, and still tapped into it. And he had some really good reasons for abandoning conventional medicine, which we'll explain as time goes on. So we want to tell you a little bit about him,
Mhm.
and we've got his maternal lineage. So so the the story begins really in 1772 when Captain James Moore from Scotland hears from a relative, Abraham Looney, about a beautiful valley in Virginia with abundant ginseng and other herbs and plenty of game, and they name it Abbs Valley in Tazewell County. Now, the valley was, of course, full of Indians, and they weren't really happy with Europeans moving in, and so there was tension. And this led to Moore's son, James Moore Jr., being taken captive by the Shawnee warrior Black Wolf in 1784, when Jr. was age 14. So Black Wolf sold Jr. to his sister, his half-sister, for an old horse, and then Jr. was sold two more times until he was age 15, at which time he attended a dance and met a French trader from Detroit, Baptiste Eliom, who bought him for $50 Indian money. So Baptiste welcomed him into the family and gave him good advice. And there in Detroit, he heard from a Shawnee friend about a massacre that had taken place. So it was the Moore family massacre. And it happened in 1786 on the 14th of July. There are varied accounts of it, but 40 to 50 Shawnee and 10 to 12 Cherokee killed James Moore's father and 5 of the other children. They kidnapped Moore's wife, the other 4 children, and Martha Evans, who was living with the family. Later, a bit later, a dozen or so Cherokee got drunk with some Shawnee and chose the wife and daughter as representative sacrifices and killed them. They sold everyone else. So, James Moore Jr. found out that they had moved close to where he was living. They were just across the border in Canada near Detroit. And Martha's brother paid for the release of the 3, and they returned to their families. So Still's mother, Martha, was the daughter of James Jr. And there's an account of this massacre written by Francis Lee Williams in the 19th century that's available as a free download, and it's called The Shawnee Tomahawk. It was quite a popular book in the 19th century. So here's Still's father, Abram Still. So Abram's father, Boaz, was a gambler and a horse racer, and Abram's mother, Mary, was half Lumbee, so she was half indigenous by the ways these things are figured from the Blood Quantum Act of 1904. But in those days, she would have been considered 100% Lumbee, because if you had any, you had it all. And so Abram was therefore a quarter Native American, but in those days he would have been considered 100% Native American. So he became a Methodist circuit rider. And when the Tennessee Methodist Conference, the Southern Methodists, supported slavery, he was thrown out of Virginia. And A.T. Still, though, before that point, was born in 1828 in Lee County, Virginia. By 1904 standards, he was 1/8 Lumbee, but by 1828 standards, he was fully Native American. And so this is where he was born, the cabin where he was born, and it was moved to the A.T. Still Museum in Kirksville, Missouri, fairly recently. So Still grew up in the Methodist tradition, and John Wesley, who was, I believe, the founder of Methodism, was a publisher of medical textbooks, and he read so many that he thought he could write his own. And so he wrote his own medical textbook in 1747. And he believed that the body can heal itself, and that the contemporary medicine of his day was overcomplicated and confusing. And so, of course, the therapies, the medications of those days consisted of opium, steel, bark, whiskey, quicksilver, not herbs, and not the simple things that he advocated, which were physical exercise, cleanliness, rest, and temperance in food and drink. So, and there's certainly some good quotes from John Wesley, all pointing toward the idea that people can heal themselves. And so this was the atmosphere into which A.T. Still emerged. And next we come to Benjamin Rush, who is considered the father of American psychiatry. His picture is on all of the merch sold by the American Psychiatric Association. And so Rush invented what was called the heroic cure, which consisted of mercury, whiskey, and opium. And that was supposed to cure everything, just about. And so the belief of the time was that fever caused disease instead of being a result of disease, and that the treatment was to bleed people and to purge the stomach and the bowels. So patients were bled unconscious and purged with mercurious chloride until they showed signs of mercury poisoning, which included excessive salivation. And here are the symptoms of mercury poisoning: ash gray tongue and pharynx, excessive salivation, ulcerated lips, cheeks, and tongues, gastric pain often accompanied by bloody diarrhea, and the loss of teeth. So we can say with some authority that American psychiatry has been poisoning people since its inception with Benjamin Rush. So, and there was a well-known singing group in the 1840s called the Singing Hutchinsons, whose song Anti-Calomel was their most requested number. And here's how it goes. And when I must resign my breath, pray let me die a natural death, and bid the world a long farewell without one dose of calomel. so, so not everyone liked the heroic cure, even in 1840. And here's a drawing, maybe a photo, of someone who got the heroic cure, and it destroyed his nasal cartilage and pharynx and lots of other things. And of interest, it was manufactured by Park Davis and Company, who are still in business. So, how does this relate to Still and the Indians? Well, at age 14, Still was dosed with calomel, and it loosened his teeth, and it caused him to have to buy store-bought teeth, and it also turned him against the contemporary medicine of the day and inspired him to look for something alternative. So, so the Shawnee had a Spanish land grant at Cape Girardeau in Missouri, and in 1803, the Louisiana Purchase disrupted all that. So some of the Shawnee went west to Texas and Old Mexico, and later moved to the Canadian River in southern Oklahoma, becoming the absentee Shawnee tribe. and others in northwest Ohio were put on 3 reservations through the 1817 Treaty of Fort Meigs, but in 1825 um, the U.S. Congress took the land in Cape Girardeau and gave them a 1.6 million acre reservation in eastern Kansas. And with the Indian Removal Act of 1830, the Ohio Shawnees were also moved to Kansas, eastern Kansas. So, but in 1854, in true government fashion, the U.S. government reduced the Shawnee reservation to 160,000 acres, forcing many Kansas Shawnees to relocate to the Cherokee Nation in northeastern Oklahoma. It wasn't ever formally extinguished, and so some Shawnee families retained their Kansas allotment and live there today. Um, but the federal government caused many Shawnees and the Cherokee to enter into a formal agreement in 1869 where they were combined. In the year 2000, they finally separated. So, um, so the Still family moved to Missouri in 1836, having been chased out of Virginia for anti-slavery views. And in those days, Missouri wanted to enter as a slave state, Nebraska wanted to be a free state, and Kansas was divided. So in 1844, the church divided. The Southern Methodist Church was pro-slavery, and the other branch of the Methodist Church was anti-slavery. And Still's father tried to stay with the Southern Methodist Church and still remain anti-slavery, but when it came to ropes and bullets, the better part of valor was to leave, and so they did. So in 1849, Andrew Taylor Still married and was fighting against slavery. In 1852, his father moves to Kansas and establishes the Wakarusa Mission, which we showed you, with the Fish People Shawnee. So, so during that time, Still was hanging out with the Shawnee, treating Shawnee, learning from Shawnee, and his mother Martha was ambivalent, frightened. Shawnees were usually friendly, but occasionally there were episodes involving drinking and violence. And in 1854, the pro-slavery Methodists arranged a fake deal, with the government and, quote, delivered the Shawnee land in return for huge amounts of land and cash in exchange for educating the Indians. So the mission was closed, and the Stills lost their homestead, and the Shawnee lost their land. So at that time, then there was a huge influx of settlers to take over that land, and there was tremendous competition for recruiting pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers, because the Kansas-Nebraska Act called for a popular vote to decide the question of slavery. So the Civil War began early in Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska in around 1855, with John Brown and James Lane and what was called Bleeding Kansas. So, so during that time, Still was revolting against heroic medicine, and medicine was unregulated. So the key diseases were smallpox, measles, cholera, typhoid, and malaria. There was a treatment of malaria with quinine, which angered conventional doctors who said it was quackery, because everyone knows that the proper treatment is bleeding and purging. And most medicines for actually everything were full of alcohol and opium. Um, One Kansas physician told a student, "There are two things that trouble me. One is that I am sure that half of what I taught you is wrong. This troubles me, but the other troubles me more. That is, I am not sure what half it was." And so that was the nature of the time. So in 1855, still began in unearthing bones. They were Indian bones. We don't know if he had permission to do that or not. We suspect he must have had some permission or he would have met with stiff opposition. But this is how he began his study of anatomy. And of course, through immigration, still was exposed to medical reformers, nature-based, plant-based, indigenous practitioners, Indian medicine it was called, snake oil, which was often much more benign than the heroic cure, homeopathy, spiritualism, bone setters, Chinese tui na, which came with the railroads, and acupuncture. So in 1854, the Bone Bill was passed, and this was about licensing who could dissect human bodies. And the Bone Bill held that so people had to be licensed, which was the beginning of medical licensure, to dissect bodies, and that you could dissect criminals and those who had received public assistance. So, so in the meantime, while still is learning medicine from the Indians, he's also fighting against slavery. And there's a great story about how he escaped from murderous pro-slavery forces by riding his mule across a very narrow icy bridge. And when he got to his friends, no one believed him, and they insisted on going back and having him do it again, which he did. So still had a very good mule, I might add. And by that time he was a highly regarded frontier doctor. He was anti-opium and anti-whiskey for both the doctor and the patient, because typically both of them took the cure. By 1857, he was a legislator for pre-men in Kansas, and by 1858, Kansas was anti-slavery. In 1859, his wife died, and he remarried in 1860. So, this is the Civil War. Probably most of you are familiar with it from high school, but the gray states are the slave states, the pink states are the free states, the green states are territories, and Kansas is in the center. So, Still rode the same mule through the whole Civil War. That must have been one good mule. He was shot through the coat twice. He was very practical. So he came upon a group of soldiers being attacked by the Confederate Army, who had fallen to their knees and to pray. And he basically said, "Get off your knees and fight!" But he was also compassionate. He was known for giving the enemy food. And in 1864, two things happened. His regiment was disbanded, and his children died of meningitis, which galvanized his need to replace the medicine of the time with something better. And his belief was that the Indian medicine was no more ridiculous and perhaps better than the treatments of the so-called scientific doctors of medicine. And he was very critical of the remedies of the so-called scientific doctors, and believed that the body held the clue for healing. So many of the things that he said, and maybe Josie can add to this, many of the things that he said totally parallel indigenous North American philosophy. This is a wonderful painting of his concept of the nervous system from 1920. And it just so speaks to energy medicine. And one can imagine putting his these things in the circles onto a four directions diagram. So he was innovative. I mean, when he had headaches, he made a swing of a plow line between two trees and adjusted his neck. When he had dysentery, he adjusted his back and got rid of his pain. So Still was 25 years old in 1853, and he worked with the Shawnee for 22 years. He spoke fluent Shawnee, and 2 years after moving to the Shawnee reservation in 1855 is when he began to think about these new methods of healing. So, so besides the facts of nature, he had Indian teachers, and besides the badger, coyote, and his mule, he had fellow healers from those tribes. Now, his daughter Blanche Laughlin was also fluent in Shawnee, and this is a letter from Blanche, and oops, she writes it in Shawnee and then translates it into English. So she says the Shawnee means, "What me do now comes from the loving God, and me do love and thank Him." Pitch in. Um, so and it's too bad that she translated it maybe in that way, because it sounds less educated and than it would if she had um, changed the me to I. But I just want to note that there are modern languages that speak this way. For example, in Russian one says, "Мне нравится музыку." I love music. And it's me love music. So if you translated Russian literally, you would get the same result as what she's doing with Shawnee. So, and interestingly enough, at the end of their lives, both A.T. Still and Blanche had strokes and lost the ability to speak English, but still spoke Shawnee. So, so now I'm counting on Barb and Josie to add anything here that we need to say. But of importance is that Still was thrown out of the church for his devil ways. So they believed that touching the body came from evil spirits, and they believed that the devil had drawn Still into his rabbit snare, and that everything that Still was teaching came from the devil, because touching people, touch therapy was devil worship. You were only allowed to anoint them with oil, pray over them, and put your hand on their head. So, so that must have been a bit traumatic for Still. So, there's a fellow named E. Tucker who wrote a lot about Still, who knew him. And Tucker said that osteopathy came from the combination of the names of two Indian tribes, the Oswegos and the Potawatomi, though others claimed that it came from the Greek words osteon and pathos, which would mean the pathology of bones. I tend to like the former better than the latter. So here's Still with Albert Hubbard, and one of the most important things that Still taught was to take an Indian look at something, and that meant to forget what you know and to just observe quietly without expectations. And there are many more examples of this that leads one to believe that Still was quite familiar with indigenous philosophy, including this quote that the Creator equipped man with native forces sufficient to run the machinery of human life safely and smoothly to a ripe old age, and he has wisely placed the means for applying them and controlling them within easy reach. This is a bone, and Still said to know a bone in its entirety would close both ends of an eternity. So I take that as a kind of transcendentalism of the prairie, influenced by indigenous people. At the same time, Walt Whitman was talking about the perfect miracle of a blade of grass. And there was this, I think, indigenous influenced American transcendentalism that um, could not give credit to the indigenous people because of how negatively they were seen. But nevertheless, it demonstrates indigenous philosophy. So now Still himself called him, referred to himself as a Hochonethawa, which is a Shawnee word for doctor. And he also called himself a lightning bone setter, which was a term primarily reserved for native people and had to do with the use of hands to set bones that were fractured and to reduce dislocations. So Still was around age 55 when he began to refer to himself as a Hochonethawa. And this is the Dene rug which he put on his treatment table, which he used to work with people. So, anyway, that's Still. And we just want to say that this this Cherokee Pawnee Shawnee Kickapoo style of bodywork that we're going to expose you tonight is very, very close to American osteopathy because that's where it came from. So, do you want to say any more words about that, Josie or Magali, being osteopaths?
Well, I was just going to offer that Still never taught specific techniques. He taught concepts, and the concepts that he liked to teach was really about looking at and comparing the body to the earth. That the fluids of the body, the cerebral spinal fluid and the arterial blood and the lymph and the venous blood needed to flow freely in order to nourish the withering fields. It's one of the things he talks about, and so the idea is to um, do what you need to do in order to get the waters, the fluids, the energy to flow. Although he never used the word energy, he certainly referred to the fluids, and he frequently compared the body to the earth. But I think he had a real beautiful vision, either either from who he was to begin with and who he was influenced by, to um, to improve the
Indeed.
body's health, or to find the body's health by making the flow happen. And it was not until he went, he developed school, and created, you know, this order of a school, and then brought in other teachers to continue on to, carry on osteopathy, that made it extremely scientific and mechanical,
And that was really the
which is
metaphor
what
of
we learn
his day.
today
Yeah.
in medical schools. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it was like the mechanic, the great mechanic.
Hmm.
And so there's, on the one hand, yes, understanding of the mechanics and the architecture of the body and the anatomy to Andrew Taylor Still was what it was about. But on the other side, it was really about um, the flourishing, the nourishing of this body.
Hmm.
And it was how I realized when I was in medical school as an osteopathic student, after 2 years of studying, when I met you, Lewis, I was attending a weekend, and you had started to help me to move my ribs. I thought, oh my gosh, we're definitely not doing anything like this in medical school. Like, why are we not really honestly moving the body? I was astounded and convinced that learning what you knew through Cherokee Bodywork was the way that I honestly needed to study to be able to heal somebody, rather than being very specific. I mean, it's great to be specific, because you can pass an exam if somebody asks you, what do you see there? And you are really, really articulate about, well, this is side bent to the left and flexed and rotated by 70 degrees, but that doesn't heal somebody. Moving the breath and moving the fluids is really what helps somebody improve.
Yeah. And that would have
So
been it would have been
I learned a great
consistent.
lesson.
Hmm. Consistent with Still. Yeah.
Mhm.
Any
Yeah.
other thought, Magali? Are you here? I can't see you on my gallery, but if you are, anything you want to
Yeah,
add?
yeah, I'm here. Um, I guess it's interesting to hear the story again. I've heard it a few times, but hear the story again and sort of think about it in terms of Albert Marshall's work and this kind of two-eyed seeing approach, and and also the 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 ways in which Andrew Taylor Still was confined to presenting the work in a certain way by the expectations of his day, and the fact that we're potentially at a time in history where we can shift that because we're starting to understand that science is still happening through a lens, and that lens is very colonial, and um, and so the idea of holding sort of two truths as being equally true um, and valid, perhaps even though one is not understood through conventional lens, through a colonial lens. I don't even want to say conventional. So that's one thing that crossed my mind. And the other is that I feel very grateful to have come to osteopathy through being a recipient of treatment. So I really decided to become an osteopath, having been benefited so much by a few different osteopaths and having experienced. And I've probably been treated in my lifetime more than anybody I know. So, but the benefit of having received that much treatment from really amazing osteopaths is that you learn it through your body. You have that felt sense um, in your own body of receiving that you can then. So the idea of of how you spoke about learning it through apprenticeship. Like that's kind of how I feel like. I mean, I went to medical school and I did all the things, but I feel like Josie said, I feel like I really learned how to use my hands through the process of receiving and giving to when
Yeah.
doing teaching.
And that was a big part of how I learned was by getting worked on, you know, getting on the table. Well, they had a little twin bed that they worked on. Just, lying down and getting treated. You just learn so much that way. Yeah. Do you feel like Tuesday night you spoke more about your um, exposure to osteopathy? Do you feel like telling us about that tonight, or you've already done it once in the week and that's enough?
That's enough. um, yeah, I mean, um, I think I could maybe do an abbreviated version because I'm really not entirely sure who I'm speaking to, like who's on the call. So
Well, we
I
never
can.
went around and introduced everyone. We probably should actually before we do that. Um, I'll just call on people because I have a screen that I can scroll through, and I know you know Josie, and I know you know yourself. So next is Joyce. Would you like to introduce yourself, Joyce? You're muted, Joyce. You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, takes me a while. I'm not that great at computers. Um, Anyhow, when I first retired, I went to a class that Dr. Lewis was teaching and learned how to do these treatments with the storytelling, the visualization, and the Cherokee Bodyworks. And I just loved it. It was so much fun. And then he said at the end of the class, I want you to use this and go out and help people. And I was like, crap, I just retired. But anyhow, I went over to a friend and I showed her the treatment, and she said, "You got to do that for people." Now, crap, here it goes again. And anyhow, I said, "Well, I don't have a massage table." So she said, "Take mine." So I go home with the massage table. My husband's finished a room in the basement. Why did he do a room in the basement? I don't know, but there it was, waiting. I put the table in the basement and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? So I went to another friend. Her church was having a fundraising and said, "Would you like a gift certificate for this treatment for your fundraiser?" She said, "Yes, and I would like a treatment." And that is that. I don't charge. It's all by word of mouth, and it's just been the most fun ever.
Fabulous.
So that's me, and that was 12 years ago. So like when I say I'm old, I am, but I'm having fun.
Cool. Very cool. How about Nicole?
Hi, I'm Nicole, and I am a medical anthropologist and a clinical social worker. And I really am happy to have found Lewis and Barbara and two-eyed counseling, two-eyed perspectives in trauma, because I think that makes, I feel like I've come home in many ways. It makes the most sense to me. It provided me context for my own healing journey. And also I feel way more joyful in terms of the material I share with students and people in my private practice. So I'm here to learn more about healing in terms of the body, and how to maybe integrate some of this into how I work with people in my private practice and also with friends and other members. So I'm really glad to be here, and thanks.
Very cool. Ryan, I think you're next.
Hi there. My name is Ryan. I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm a massage therapist and a craniosacral therapist for about 22 years now. There's been a lot of interest lately in the roots of osteopathy to try to get clear about where cranial work came from. So that was originally what drew me here, was to learn more about the roots of osteopathy.
All right, very cool. So, is there anyone else who's just on a phone that I can't see on the screen? Or is that all of us?
There's Eve. There's Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate. Hi, Ryan. I know Ryan. I am sitting in Charlemont, Massachusetts on Route 2. And I'm a chiropractor. I've been a chiropractor for, I don't know, 31 years. And I knew that
Okay.
the work really, wasn't just from Stevie Palmer and BJ Palmer. And I've been waiting to hear this information for a long, long time. And it's just really refreshing to hear this. I'm happy to be here. I'm also a biodynamic craniosacral teacher. I got a school here, and just love body work.
Very cool. And of course, we've driven through your town on the way to Rowe Conference Center, so we know exactly where you're located.
Oh, great! Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. There's Jasmine. Jasmine's not on my screen, but she is on Barb's.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jasmine. I thank you guys for doing this work. I don't have a background in medicine. I'm an artist, and I just graduated with a master's in consciousness studies and exploring different energy systems and energy work. So, Lewis, I read your book, The Spirit of Healing, and just fell in love with the stories. And I've been really eager to learn from you. So, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Very cool. Is there anyone else? That was Kate who just talked. Kate.
No, that was Jasmine.
That was Jasmine. Kate was before her.
Oh.
There's Eve. Is that Eve?
No, that was Eve, I think.
Oh, did Eve talk? Maybe not. Maybe she's not here.
Not yet.
Yes? No? Well, I think that's everyone, Magali. And we were probably remiss. What? Oh, Barb, you didn't talk. Well, everyone knows you. Well, go ahead and talk.
I'll just
Be very brief to say that I'm a clinical social worker, and I've been doing this kind of work since I first met Lewis in 2009 and eight.
Six.
2006. And one of the things that really interests me is looking at the internal experience and the way it meets the external experience to create. When we talk about inspiring people's self-healing, I think it's really interesting to think about what's going on for the person receiving the work. And a lot of the storytelling that we encourage and the imaging that we encourage, and that imagery, and coming up with the ways of articulating metaphorically the pain or tension or internal experience is really the person working with the provider to create this transformation, or to instigate this kind of your self-healing mechanisms. So I'm really interested in that internal experience and the way it gets activated when someone gets worked on, and the reciprocity in that, and how that really helps people to get better. So I think it's really fabulous to talk about how a provider is working and important not to forget that it's also evoking things in the person receiving and that's kind of a really big contributing energy to the healing work. So nice to meet everybody.
Okay. Did we miss anyone? Did we get everyone? All right, then Magali, back to you. Whatever you feel drawn to share.
Yeah, well, I think I can tell a little bit, maybe hopefully a briefer version of the story I told on Tuesday. Um, so it's interesting to kind of segue off of what Barb just said. So I'm talking to you from Scarborough, Maine, and I grew up in the western mountains of Maine, and my parents are still married. They've been married for 50 years, and they were married when I was born, and we lived on a little farm in the mountains, and or in the hills, I guess you'd say. And I was always a pretty sensitive kiddo in a lot of different ways. But I was also a really active kid. So I was riding horses and dancing and climbing trees and always outdoors and injuring myself quite a bit. And also pretty sensitive to what was going on around me in sort of an empathic way. I think picking up different energies and difficulties inside my family. But ended up developing as a teenager, a young teenager and a teenager, some pretty significant low back pain, which was chronic and interrupted my life. And at the time, just had an MD pediatrician and who was a lovely person and who was the kind of the town doctor. We lived in a very small town. But he really didn't have much to offer. He knew that structurally I was fine and I didn't need back surgery. So it was just sort of, ibuprofen and you'll be fine. And back then there wasn't a lot of access to physical therapy. Like right now, people might be referred to a physical therapist if they had that kind of pain, if there wasn't an osteopath around. But eventually a dance teacher of mine came into contact with an osteopath who was the next town over. And her name was Judy Shedd. And she, her dad had also been an osteopath. And so she actually wasn't too, generationally too far removed from sort of the first people doing osteopathy. And I went to see her right before I went off to college, and she was incredibly helpful to me, just in terms of validating the fact that through her skilled evaluation of my physical body was like, yeah, I can absolutely see why you would be in some pain, and here's what I think we can do. And I'm going to give you some names of people who are going to be near your college so you can hook up with an osteopath out there. And so that was like the really beginning of a life-changing experience where I didn't have to dance through a whole bunch of pain all the time. And so I hooked up with Bruce Flagg, who's an osteopath out in California, who practices largely biodynamic field. Judy is she does cranial osteopathy, but she's got a different flair to it. So I had the benefit of having these really interesting and different people and their approach treating me. And so I did, and I was a communication major, and I would have been a dance major if there was a dance major. And I made my way through college wanting to make film and be an artist. And with great help of osteopathy. And when I graduated from college, came home and started teaching dance. And at the same time as I was doing that, I was having experiences of feeling and seeing and interacting with different energies that I felt that people were containing or were party to. So there was sort of an energetic experience that was happening for me that was unusual, and um, allowing or aiding me in having unusual experiences of my own. And this went on and kind of intensified for a number of months, maybe 6 or 7 months, at which point the intensity of the energy was pretty magnified. And there was one point at which I was driving. I had 3 jobs at the time, and I wasn't probably getting enough sleep. And I was driving from one job home, and it was late at night, and I just had a sort of overwhelming emotional experience, and it felt as though all of the filters that keeps one sort of contained had dropped away, and a bunch of misery was just sort of pouring through me, images and visions and of the Dark Ages and medieval times and the Holocaust and slavery, and just it was really quite it was really too much. And so I went through this for probably a couple of hours on my own, and eventually kind of pulled myself together. But for about a week or so after that, I went through the world functioning in a bit of a haze, and eventually kind of lost my ability to function. Showed up at my parents' house and took off all my clothes and was sort of babbling, and maybe hadn't eaten for a couple days and hadn't slept. And they, of course, were like, what is going on? And who is this person? She's not our daughter. And they really tried hard. God bless them. They just really couldn't conceive of where I was at, because I just have always been a pretty straightforward person. And but that experience ended me up in a psychiatric unit, because I didn't have a way to organize myself. And that's at the time, and probably still, where people who are going through that kind of experience end up. So I was there a couple of different times. The first time I was there for about 10 days and given the diagnosis of bipolar disorder, put on a bunch of medications and discharged. And I very soon took myself off all of those medications, because why did I need those? And ended up back in that hospital for a couple of months, and really was pretty floridly psychotic, and vacillated from psychosis to catatonia and back. And a lot of the images and visions I had in that really intense experience were visiting me in the hospital. So I still have a lot of weird and kind of strange memories of that time. But when I finally realized a couple of months in that I needed to somehow pull myself together to get the hell out, because the experience of being in psychiatric hospital was further damaging and not allowing me to make much sense of what had happened. So I did that, and I will say that once I did, and once I was able, I reestablished my relationship with Judy, who was doing osteopathy still. And she knew I had been in hospital. And she, someone asked how it was, on Tuesday night, how it was that osteopathy was beneficial or it was helpful in that stage of my healing. And, by the time I got out, I wasn't I wasn't what you would call psychotic anymore. I was pretty deeply depressed and pretty shattered. Um, and I didn't have a clear sense of a container. I certainly hadn't had one for a good half a year. And it was really, I think it was really crucial for me to have somebody, number one, who I could go and see, who really, though she was a physician herself, really didn't buy into the, she didn't believe that what had happened to me was a pathology. And she didn't believe that I was broken and I needed to be fixed. She just knew that I had had an overwhelming experience and I needed help putting myself back together. And so there was a lack of judgment and sort of an understanding of you really need this way of accessing your nervous system. You need to be held as a whole. You need this way of accessing your nervous system that I can provide with my hands to allow your system to come back to some sort of balance, to reestablish a home base. And I certainly in my career have seen, you know, I think it's really common for kids, for people who are coming out of their time in college, to have this really period of just, what the fuck am I doing? What am I going to do with my life? And how is this all going to go? And I've definitely seen people really have some difficult mental health challenges at that point in their life. And you know, if I'm seeing them, if I've seen them, then they're coming to me for hands-on work, and I'm hoping that what I'm providing is similar to what Judy was able to provide for me then. And I guess I probably stop there and offer that much.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the really important thing is how much hands-on work can affect emotions and what we call mental health, which could be called emotional well-being, perhaps. That the work with touch and with the body is tremendously important in that healing process. And you know, the really crazy thing to me, I mean, is how siloed touch therapies are from the whole world of mental treatment, I suppose we could call it. It's not exactly mental health, but that certainly isn't true in the indigenous world. There's no such separation, and and I think osteopaths are getting more courageous about declaring the absence of separation for them as well. And I remember we have an osteopathic fellowship where I work, and we had a psychiatrist who took it. And one of the psychiatrists at the psychiatric hospital was just aghast. She was ranting about how it was total malpractice for him to touch his patients, because what could be more intimate than being a psychiatrist? And I looked at her and I said, so how well do you know your patients in your 10-minute office visits? How intimate are you with anyone? And she looked at me and says, well, I could be. I mean, I could get to know them. I mean, it's possible that I might know them. And I'm like, but do you really know them in 10 minutes? Of course, that didn't go over well. but but anyway, she left anyway. So she didn't stick around. But it was just such an interesting discussion to me, because there was this assumption of intimacy in the relationship of prescribing a drug without actually even knowing the person, that was somehow needed to be somehow mitigated against, you know, say craniosacral work or adjusting someone, or hands-on work, even with narrative. Um, and it's just such a funny division. It's such a funny separation that exists in this culture. So hopefully we can overcome it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel just so lucky, so grateful that I had access to um, treatment like that. That I had already met Julie, had already established. I knew who she was, she knew who I was. I just don't know that I would have recovered in the way that I did without her help. I really don't. I mean, certainly the psychiatrist that I was seeing after the fact, no. It's just creepy and weird and
Well, it's kind of a good moment too in psychotherapy in general, for somatic treatments. Peter Levine is probably the kind of straightest voice that I know who talks about the engagement, what happens to the body in trauma and how treating the body is really important. And I remember when I was first starting out, I, I was a drama therapist, and my uh, oh, I have to take this. I apologize.
We have someone who's
Yeah.
it's a patient calling. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Lewis.
I was muted. Barb had to run off to take a call from someone who's trying to get in, so, and probably can't figure out how to do it. But yeah, so she can hold that thought, and maybe we'll get into some demonstration of the work, of some aspects of the work. We did another program earlier today, and we were able to do breath work and hips and abdomen. So I thought tonight we could do head and neck and back and something else. We could at least get that far. And I'll put up the earlier recording for people to watch. So we'll create a Google Classroom where people can enter and watch that video and this video, both, as they wish. So, but we can't actually do anything until Barb comes back because she's my demo. So we have a new person who's joined us, Kelsey. Uh, welcome to Kelsey.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Um, yeah, I'm from Maine and I'm fascinated by all this work and I go swimming in the ocean in the winter. And that's it.
Very good, very good. Our friend Patrick who lives in Orono where we live, is now jumping into rivers in the winter, and I haven't had the courage to follow him yet, so we'll see. It doesn't feel appealing to me, but you never know. I might, after a lodge, I might jump in the snow. I might be willing to do that. Roll around in the snow or something like that. So, um, and just by the way, for Josie and Magali, we're going to do lodge on the 23rd. So for short day. So if you guys are interested, I don't know who has any time off these days when, but that's a day off that I get since I work the 24th, 25th. They're giving me the 23rd. So, well, let's see. we're gonna have to talk about something while I wait for my demo person to come back. Who's got who has
Could
something
you
else?
could you speak more about the lodge, the practice?
Sure. Um, yeah, it's the Lakota purification ceremony, and we try and do one every couple weeks. And we've been keeping them small due to COVID, mostly keeping them limited to people we know, or people who can convince us that they're careful. Um, and we're pretty confident that we can kill COVID in the lodge because it dies at plus 52. And didn't you lose some leg hair last time, Josie, or something? I think I can get it well above plus 52.
Yeah, I think I lost some hair for sure.
Yeah, who
Magdalene, you
need?
still have some eyebrows. That's good.
Oh, eyebrows are overrated.
Don't need those. Yeah.
Don't need those either.
So hot.
Yeah, so we do the you can read about the Lakota uh, purification ceremony. There's a book by Raymond Bucko called The Lakota Sweat Lodge, which was his dissertation at the University of Nebraska. And we don't call it sweat lodge because that's a Jesuit term. That's what the Jesuits called it, though Bucko is a Jesuit, so I guess he can call it that. But we call it, in Lakota, the word is Inipikago. Inipi means, so P means they. P is the plural. It makes something plural. And so Ini means um, like revitalize, to breathe life into something again. And it comes from a root verb for breathing and life. So Ini, I. So Inipi means they breathe life into themselves again. So Inipi, P being the plural ending. And Kaga is the word for ceremony. So properly translated, it's revitalization ceremony. And since that debacle in Arizona where an idiot said he was doing a sweat lodge, only he wasn't, um, our Lakota elders have been telling us, don't use the word sweat lodge because it's not sweat. It's stuff you need to get rid of, and it's revitalization. And the Lakota sued the U.S. government for allowing the guy to call it a sweat lodge because there was a treaty that required respect for Lakota ceremonies. Needless to say, they lost, but it was a good gesture. Um, so anyway, that's kind of a short version of what we're doing, and we certainly would welcome if you're living in Maine and you wanted to come hang out around the fire and get to know us, and we could get to know you and feel comfortable that you weren't disrespecting COVID virus, then come hang out around the fire once and wear your mask and work your way into the inside, you know, as we come to trust you. But COVID will be over someday, and then we'll go back. We'll go back to maybe 14 people or 15 instead of limiting it to 7. So that will happen. Someday COVID will be a thing of the past, and we'll look back on this and, you know, I see some good things that came out of it, like what we're doing right now. I wouldn't have thought to do this before COVID. And the courses that we're doing with two-eyed seeing, I wouldn't have thought to do that before COVID. It just wouldn't have occurred to me. And, so some good things have come of it. I feel more connected to a lot of people in the world now than I did before. And so we're putting together a course for starting early March now, another course for a course about overthrowing psychiatric diagnoses, getting rid of psychiatric diagnoses. And the really cool thing is, so I've got someone from the United Kingdom who's going to talk about the threat power meeting network, and another guy from Australia who's done a lot of work in that area, and then a woman in Australia, Aboriginal woman, who's working at finding ways to work with at-risk parents without labeling them at risk, which seems really cool. And then we've got a guy from Western Australia who's going to talk to us about like spiritual alternative ways of thinking about psychiatric phenomena from spiritual perspectives instead of DSM. And he did like a 500-page dissertation on this at the University of Western Australia. So I would have never thought to connect people like this. It just wouldn't have occurred to me to think, oh, we could all talk together on Zoom. Won't that be fun? And it has been really fun, you know? So, I don't know. Where's my demo person? My demo person is stuck on the phone. That's the problem with COVID, though. If you only get one demo person, and if they have to take a call, you're like stuck here rattling your mouth and no one to demonstrate on. So I guess I'll just keep trying to stimulate conversation until Barb comes back. But anyway, sooner or later we'll all be able to be together again. But I think the cool thing is that we'll be able to include people from far away who can't afford to travel. They'll still be a part of us through Zoom. I don't think that'll go away. I feel too connected with so many people around the globe in such a more deeper way than I was before that I don't want to let that go. You know, I want to keep that. And COVID gave that to me, so thank you, COVID. You know, you're not all bad. You're probably just misunderstood. And apparently if we don't show you respect, you really mess with us. So may we show you deep respect always. And never forget that. Though I saw a program. Now I'm. If anyone has anything meaningful to say while we wait for Barb, please jump in. But so I listen to the Paris news in the morning because I find it more interesting than the American news because I learn more about the world. Plus, it's in French, and I get to practice. And there was an interesting program on this morning about how never before have so many wild species been in such close contact with humans. And these ethnozoologists are writing and speaking about how it's this encroachment of humans into the territory of wild animals that's making it so much more possible for disease to jump from animals to humans. So coronavirus 2, COVID-19 from bats. And then there was swine flu from pigs. And then Ebola, I think it came from monkeys. And SARS-1, which came from chickens, birds, avian flu. Mm-hmm. And these ethnozoologists were talking about how it's like a perfect storm, where we eliminate biodiversity, so we reduce the the number of hosts for these viruses. Like they can't conveniently find another bat or family of bats, and we tremendously increase the number of humans around them, so it becomes convenient to mutate to infect humans because humans are more readily available than any other species, and we increase the temperature of the planet, which increases the rate of mutation of viruses. There you go. So, so they were saying, you know, we did this to ourselves. That you know, these viruses, they're just kind of taking advantage of the opportunities that we're giving them as human beings. You know, and if we'd been a little more circumspect in how we killed off the flora and fauna, probably it wouldn't have happened. So it's really a sobering thing to think about. I mean, to wonder, well, so what happens next if we keep going down this path? You know, what new disease will nature produce for us, and bring us back into lockdown and quarantine for another 2 years? So, so I wish we'd smarten up. I don't know that we're gonna, but I wish we would. So, um, I'm still waiting on Barb. Anyone? Can anyone add something or throw in a throw in something to the mix?
There's
I
a
would
book.
just like
Oh,
to add that, sure, you sure, Miguel? You'd be smarter than me. I just wanted to add that I'm doing this without any medical training. You know, I sold tickets at the train station. So, when I retired, and with what I've learned from Dr. Lewis, and I also do Reiki and therapeutic touch, but um, it's just amazing how you just do, like we were taught this morning, the sensing, and just what you feel is the right thing to do, you do, and people are getting better. I mean, they really are. I've had people come that have had migraines forever, and they don't have migraines anymore. It's just amazing. I mean, I don't even know where the body parts are, you know? I just go by whatever
You
I
read the
feel.
body.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I just,
exactly.
yeah.
And this
So,
is how it always was. People worked on their friends and family, and you know, it was people were generalists. They had a general knowledge of a lot of stuff, and that was conducive to survival. And you know, it's different from today where we are siloed, you know, and we know a lot about very little, which is probably not that great for survival, you know. And yeah, and that's really we really think that, you know, this sort of hands-on healing is something everyone should do for everyone. You know, and there's certain principles that we talked about this morning, and I'll just, you know, that you don't push beyond someone's limits, that you respect their limits and their boundaries. You don't push past resistance. You work at the edge of resistance in a gentle way, and we just practice humble inquiry to the body. This is a term I learned on Wednesday from a friend in Gatineau, Marquis Bureau, who told me about a professor at MIT who invented this term, humble inquiry, that has to do with asking questions in a humble way in a therapeutic relationship, such that things emerge that weren't known before to either party. And so it's a non-expert way of dialogue, of respect, of showing respect, and of showing that you don't know what the other person knows, and you're curious. You want to learn what they know and how they think and how their world works, and in that process, they might discover that some of their assumptions are contradictory. They might realize that their strategy for getting what they want isn't quite working. If my strategy for getting what I want is to yell at people, well, if I'm in court and I yell at the judge, that might go poorly, you know, as one of Barbara's clients recently learned. So, um, it's just kind of interesting if we de-hierarchicize, if we try to remove the hierarchy among us, that things go better. That if we try and be more equal and respectful and egalitarian, that it's good. And this sort of tremendous levels of hierarchy that we've created in the world are not serving us. You know, I mean, um, if I know a little bit more about something than someone else, I don't have to be elevated, on this tall pedestal. I can just be one of the group and just happen to know a little bit more about something and share it when it's appropriate, and but still be an equal to everyone else. And I think I think that's how I tend to practice medicine. And I think um, you know I, um, I know that my indigenous clients really like me, and some of my non-indigenous clients really don't. So I suspect that some of the non-indigenous clients want like a powerful doctor figure who solves all their problems. And the indigenous clients are more interested in like just a fellow traveler who's had some struggles too and wants to try and dialogue with them about what to do. Like I remember this guy that we've been working with. I'm like, dude, you and meth just don't get along. It does weird shit to your brain, guy. He's like, you're right. And I don't know. So I'm not wagging my finger at him saying, don't do meth. I'm just observing that it sure did a number on his brain. And I'm like, that meth spirit, uh, you know, you don't know where it came from. And you probably don't know the song to sing to it. It might have some bad juju, that's attached to it. You might want to be careful around that shit, you know, and stay away from things that you don't know the right song for. And he's like, yeah, man, I have no idea what to sing to that thing. I'm like, yeah, stick with things you know the song for. So, um, but, it,
Hey,
I
I
re-
have one here.
the what?
I have a person to treat if you want me to if you want it, I can channel you.
Oh, you have someone to treat? Cool. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
All right, go for it.
okay. You just talk me through. This is Nick.
Ah, all right. Go for Nick. Go
Okay.
for it. Let's do Nick.
Okay. What are we working on? What did you think of working on? Should I
I would work on whatever ails
find
Nick.
some? You want to talk me through?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe. Well, we haven't demonstrated back or arms or head, neck, and shoulders yet on video.
Okay, he needs a shoulder.
Yeah, and you know how to do this, Josie.
So
You don't
this
need me
one?
to tell you anything.
Okay.
So
Deal.
I can do a running commentary while you work.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so um, Josie's, oh, that doesn't work because there's a way to pin you on the screen even though I'm talking. Let me see how to do that. I know what I'll do. I'll turn off my video. So Josie's going to work on Nick.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how to pin her on the screen.
If you just say pin this, if you click on
Mm-hmm.
Josie's picture, and then say pin, it's usually.
A pingle.
Yep.
Okay, fabulous. Cool.
It's the opposite shoulder over here. Is that okay? Can you see what's going on?
Yeah, we can see. We can see more or less. I mean, you
Okay.
know, it's Zoom. It has its drawbacks.
You can on your side.
Yeah, we
If you
can. We can
you
hear.
on your side. So what position does it hurt in?
You know, like when I'm sitting at the dinner table, that's the worst. Yeah.
So Josie's doing a time-honored Cherokee technique, which may be also an osteopathic technique, I suspect, which is taking the shoulder through a range of motion. And I suspect that she's feeling the restrictions in the shoulder and working to release them as she moves the shoulder. Yeah. And that's just such a common thing that we do, you know, is just
Up here?
repeating the range of motion.
You up there at all?
It hurts, but I can.
Okay. I won't do that. It hurts when I lift it up like that.
Yeah.
It's like everything tightens up in there.
Yeah.
The muscle there.
There's probably some points.
Okay with that?
Yeah. That there's probably some points in the around the acromion or somewhere near there that could be rubbed to release some of that, but
Yeah. Can you just let your arm relax? Yeah, it's a little ropey in there.
yeah.
You okay?
Mm-hmm.
Also up in the neck.
And what she's doing with the traction is also very typical of the Cherokee bodywork. You know, to put traction on a joint and just kind of not too forceful, just enough to help it to let go.
Can you lie on your back again?
Because it's all about,
Can you see okay?
yeah. If we were all together, we would be gathered around the table, you know, watching closely. But, you know, we're doing our
Yeah.
best. We're with COVID. We're accommodating Mr. COVID.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, the
I'm
basic...
just bringing my fingers into that tissue.
Oh, great. Yeah. And I think we
That's
all
not
look
so
for
fun.
those. Yeah, we look for those ropey tissues or those bunched up places or those knots or, you know, whatever, however we describe them and try and get them to let go.
Yeah. I take it like this. Okay.
Yeah.
How about can you lie on can you lie on your belly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have him turn over because it's the back part of his, it's over here.
Mm.
Can this arm, is that okay? Or is it like that? Does that hurt when you do that?
It's okay. It's when it's up over my head mostly hurts.
Okay.
And that looks like mobilization of the scapula. Is that what you're doing?
Yep.
Yeah, which is
I
both.
am.
Yeah, it's both osteopathic and Cherokee. We're getting to the close correspondence.
Just kind of shaking it out.
Yeah, and that's also so much a part of this technique is the shaking. And one elder explained to me, he said, "Well, duh, wasn't Elvis Cherokee? Shake, rock, rattle, and roll." so,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of shaking, rocking, rattling, and rolling that goes on here.
I also think of that whole line all the way down into the back.
Oh
The
yeah,
shoulder going all the way down.
yeah. The shoulder goes all the way down to the
You
butt.
know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do they call it? The aponeurosis around L5 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. This other side. What happens if I take your arm up here? Okay.
Oh, careful.
And where's the catch? Right here?
Up deeper and okay.
But you probably can't see very well, but if I bring the arm any higher, it's deep. It's very deep in there. It's in the actual joint.
Mm. Yeah,
We won't do that.
I can totally imagine what you're doing. Hopefully others can too. Yeah.
Using my thumbs,
Yeah.
I'm feeling around the bones of the scapula and then around the head of the humerus, and then into the clavicle underneath.
So when COVID is over, we'll get everyone together for a laboratory session where we can all work on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You okay with this motion?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Josie, as you're working, can you feel the quality of tissues change, or like are things loosening up and then other things like
Yeah,
become
so
apparent? Like,
so I feel that my hands are finding the areas that feel stiff, colder, and then this motion, I'm just like, it's friction, it's just kind of warming everything up. And the more I move it, the more fluid it feels. And so I'm just following wherever it feels stringy. And where it feels stringy, I'm putting my thumbs in the fibers, in between the fibers, and just trying to flip it a little bit. You know, it's like when you're in the soil and you're trying to break up little pieces of the, of the earth, and you're just trying to get it to soften up.
yeah.
So, and underneath, but there's the muscle and the flesh on top. And I'm really not thinking a whole lot about, oh, that's the third rib that's feeling, but I can't help, there's a little rebounding that needs to happen here. So if it feels stringy, I'm just bringing my thumbs and my fingertips into it at this point, with circular motions.
Yeah, I know when something that Judy does quite a bit, and that I picked up from her having had it done to me, and how I like to use it in my own work, is similar to what you're doing, specifically in the back. She calls it tilling the fields, and she'll often start. It's a little bit similar to Traeger. I've learned since I've finally had my first Traeger recently. Just a lot of rocking, kind of big motions that rock, and so we might call it soft tissue, or we might. But what you're doing in terms of shaking and rocking, but kind of in big motions, that kind of it's like if you thought of your body as a big bag of water, or you're like trying to moisten everything, kind of like, and I find when I do that with people, for a little bit to begin with, what initially may have felt dry or unmoving will like melt away after just a little bit of that, and other things become more apparent, other ways that things aren't moving. So it's like this way of just activating the whole system to see, well, okay, what's really going to rise to the surface as the place that's not moving.
Yeah. So feels pretty loose.
It gets back to that whole idea that motion is life and stillness is death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think you could do my rolling over on here? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it catches right about.
Yes, one right there.
I also find that sometimes I feel like my best teachers are my kids. Like I watch them, especially lately, they've been really interested in giving each other body work. And they'll, like, one of my youngest daughter, my older daughter will say, Lily, rub my wrist or massage my wrist, and I'll see what what they just do sort of intuitively, not knowing much. And they do a similar thing. They do a lot of shaking or rubbing, in certain ways that I wouldn't necessarily come up with, but they are very innovative and interesting. And I imagine just sort of, they don't have a lot of the training. Sometimes that can get in the way of just feeling through the tissue. And it's kind of fun to watch them.
Definitely not bound.
What'd you say?
I said he's definitely not bound down from the chest and the sternum and the ribs. He's got a lot of motion.
That's
Let's
cool.
just-
I was happy to see. I was like, oh yeah, totally going there is so important, because that whole apparatus doesn't just stop. It's not like it's the scapula and the arm and shoulder. It's all completely connected. And
yes, the whole. It's just everything.
yeah.
Everything's connected.
And I think that's an important idea, is that wherever you start, you'll be led to everywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything is connected. And so if you make enough progress on one part of the body, then some other part of the body will shout out at you and say, my turn, my turn, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that other part that you've been working on is not going to get any better until you go to the part that's calling out saying, do me now, do me now.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know you can't see it, but I'm using my thumb into some of this area that. Ooh. Kind of. Oh, sorry. Okay, with that.
Mm-hmm.
Does your arm feel numb?
No, no.
It's got pretty good motion.
It looks like you've increased the range of motion since you started.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is Barb back?
Barb is back. Barb is
Okay.
in the midst of trying to arrange, was in the midst of trying to find the family of a Alaskan guy who died in Maine. So and
His ceremonies are tomorrow, so we've been trying to find one of his relatives in Alaska to be present at the ceremony tomorrow. So sorry.
Should I keep working?
um well, let's see. I could. Do you feel like there's anything else you want to demonstrate on Nick where
Can you? Okay, the ball's not really Cherokee, but
everyone needs a good ball to sit on?
everybody
You,
needs a ball.
next time you come to our house, you could take home a stump if you want to be authentic. But I think a ball,
Oh
I think a ball probably works better than a stump.
yeah, a ball is
Yeah,
nice to rock on.
yeah.
Totally selfish of me for myself, but um, well, shoulders are connected to necks, and necks are connected to heads. So,
Mhm.
did you say you didn't do neck yet?
Haven't done neck yet. No.
First, I look for motion, and sorry, I'm talking. Um, my fingers are just trying to sense where, um, you know, where it just feels restricted. And so I start broad and then I get a lot more focused. But it's probably not as interesting as it is to actually either do it or receive it.
Yeah, it's more interesting for me to watch because I know what you're doing, and
Yeah,
I can see the subtle changes in Nick. I don't know how easy it is for others to appreciate
yeah.
that. Yeah, It's one of
You know,
the drawbacks of zooming. But
yeah.
yeah, but because I've done it, I know what you're doing, and I can see that it's working.
Can you
Yeah,
narrate a little bit to
yeah,
us? You could sort of narrate what you see her doing.
yeah. And Nicole said that she did notice the range of motion difference from where she was sitting. Yeah, and
Yeah, good.
hmm and so there's all those occipital muscles and posterior neck flexors, and boy, do they get tight. I mean,
Yeah.
I I think we're all sticking out our necks all day long in various ways, and our muscles are like, oh my God,
Yeah.
they're gonna cut my head off, you know. And we try so hard to explain to them that it's all metaphor, that there's no knives out there, no one's actually gonna cut our head off.
Right?
But they don't get it. They're like, I don't believe you. No. And so I can just see you, rubbing those muscles. At least that's what it looks like you're doing. Like digging in under the occiput.
That is,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
doing all the small muscles under the occiput
yeah,
and just where it feels where it's warming up, and I just keep working at it. It's softening up. It's like, Play-Doh, or like, like
yeah, yeah.
honey.
And that's the thing. One just has to work at it for a while. It's not like touch a point and
Yeah.
instantaneously everything is different.
Yeah.
Takes a little time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, especially the more chronically tense or tight a muscle is, I think the longer it takes to convince it to let go.
Sure.
And then we start getting into the memories of trauma. Like some muscles are full of trauma memories, and part of the letting go might be letting the memory go into the mind instead of the body.
Mhm.
Becoming aware of the memory that's trapped in the body, so to speak. Unstoried in the body would be another way to say it.
Yeah, the body holds all.
And the interesting thing is, I mean,
I'm
one
just
could
tracing
spend
my fingers.
the what?
I was just tracing all the lines of the bones, the angles
Yeah,
of the bones of my fingers.
yeah, that gets at those fascial attachments. It's
Mm-hmm.
all about the fascia. Go fascia.
All about the fat.
Yeah,
Fascia.
and the interesting thing is like,
Somebody was explaining that fascia is like when you place when you step into the sand, into wet sand, and,
hmm
and then you take it. It's the same. It's like that's what fascia is like. You like compress it a little bit, and then release it, and then it's like the blood and the lymph rolls into it.
yeah, and I've been reading recently that like it's just as effective to put a needle into the fascia as to inject all the dumb stuff that we inject, because it's just disrupting the pattern that matters. Or even if you inject
Right.
something, that saline is as good as steroids and lidocaine. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just about changing the memory of the fascia.
Mhm.
we should all like live in a village where we could all just run over to each other's houses and get this done on a regular basis, you know? Like in ancient times,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
when people lived like in villages.
yeah.
Louis,
Yes.
I have a question. Can you talk a little bit more? I like the phrase unstoried trauma. Is that what you said? Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's the idea that and it comes from a woman at the University of Western Ontario who writes about this that trauma can reside in the body without a story to contain it or to make meaning of it or to process it, and that trauma actually disrupts story brain and prevents a story from forming. And so what we do sometimes in the body work is to bring out the story, to bring out metaphors, to let metaphors emerge that then become part of a story. And as a story can form that contains the trauma and gives it meaning and purpose, then um, the effects on the body diminish. And, you know, for instance, chronic pain or fibromyalgia or things like that, that, you know, there's so many things that have trauma basis. You know, it was the guy, I forget his name, Barbara might remember it, the guy who was studying people who couldn't lose weight.
I don't remember his name, but
Are
that
you
was the
are you
ACE
turn on?
scores. Oh, sorry.
It was a
Um,
study.
the ACEs study, yeah. And do you want to talk about it? Is that um,
Um,
Mag Magali? Yeah.
um, so I think this was in the early 2000s. Through Kaiser Permanente, there were a couple of, I know his name starts with something. It starts
I'll
with an
find it.
F.
Yeah.
Figueroa or Ferrante or something.
It's
I don't know.
Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a couple of surgeons who were looking at whether or not or how successful people were at losing weight and whether they could keep it off. And they
Felici.
Felici, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm gonna mess it up, Barb. I'm gonna mess up.
Well,
the story.
it was intractable. So he had the virtue of the entire Kaiser Permanente database, a massive database. And he was working with a population of people who were carrying weight and were unable to lose the weight. And he went digging in the database and he found out that all of them had a history of various kinds of trauma, which they had done a multitude of questionnaires. And so he looked at a lot more impacts, connections between traumatic experiences, and he broke them into categories that included sexual trauma, abuse, seeing your parents fighting, parent going to jail, kind of different forms of trauma. And then he uh, just observed that it takes a huge toll on someone physically, and it became a real marker now for people to measure your ACE score, which is 10 questions, which divide into these two categories, and it measures the amount of trauma that you've experienced, and then they correlate it to the potential for impacts, everything, including cognitive issues in school and behavioral issues and things like that. So it's just it's a really useful way to just, you know, make sure that somebody gets resources if they've experienced that. And a lot of work has arisen out of and I'm no expert in this, but in looking at, there's, I think The Body Keeps the Score was an early book by, I think that was Bessel van der Kolk, and then I think it was When the Body Says No. Was that Gabor Mate? So people started to, but even before that, people were looking. Well, who's the rheumatoid arthritis guy who did the stories?
The guy in Auckland.
Yeah, the book we have, that he was an early guy doing story work.
Yeah.
With I can't remember his name either. Sorry, but so this idea that if we could access the body's suffering, the wounds, that we would be able to, and there's been a sort of idea that there's a hierarchy. There's unspeakable experiences, which literally you can't speak about, and then making meaning of them, which is kind of a linguistic thing, is sort of a way of processing them. So that they kind of look at the stages of processing from nonverbal through, you know, metaphors, dynamics, light, dark, heavy, light, you know, that kind of colors, sort of a bottom up, a grassroots bottom up approach to gathering information, to finally putting them together to make meaning as a way of processing trauma. And I've been reading about body scanning and trying some of that body scanning, where often in trauma, they say that a part of your body kind of leaves. A wounded part of your body will kind of leave a space in your body. It's like the spirit of that part leaves. And thanks, Josie. Yeah, Ferletti is the guy who did the study, and that recovering that part is a really nice approach to healing. Talking to the spirit of that part that left, and seeing what it needs to come back, and seeing what it needs to kind of re-merge with other parts. And you know, often, of course, with sexual trauma, that's really recovering the root chakra, and so we're really looking at, I mean, whether you use language or chakras or not, it's kind of an interesting way to consider. And also to consider the indigenous roots of talking to the spirit of the wound, which has been around for a long time in that practice. So the idea that you talk to the spirit of the wounded part, and you know, make peace, basically, and say it's okay. And this all folds into the trauma literature about you know, the nervous system impacts, and that tie into polyvagal theory that's everywhere now, which is about basically your body's trying to keep you alive, and we have this threat detection system, and it can be highly tuned or less well tuned depending on experiences. Sometimes it doesn't work that well. Sometimes it's a little in overdrive. But that basically, you know, trying to find access to a safety state, a feeling that you're safe enough, and that you can trust yourself to be safe, is kind of a goal of healing. So that's the kind of language that's around at the moment. And there's approaches, one called somatic experiencing, which is really sitting with the experiences in your body, and learning to re-tolerate the distress feelings that are in your body. And it's having big impacts on some things to do with mental health. For example, there's a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, which basically means it's very hard for you to trust and very hard for you to find peace. And people who get that diagnosis tend to have a lot of reactivity, a lot of hyper alertness, that kind of thing. And now they're looking at how the origins are childhood experiences of trauma at a time when the system just cannot process anything that's going on. So the residue from that, and kind of a chaotic childhood, very early childhood, leave you really not knowing how to appropriately assess threat. And especially if you've already been hurt, then your threat detection system is wonky, and if you don't have any reliable ways to shape it, you have to kind of relearn from scratch. So you're really looking at how do we help people to and what happens is in that what people talk about is that people like to leave their bodies, and again with the Ferletti study, we see people who just don't attend to body sensations. They don't want to sit in their bodies. They don't want to feel the feelings of their bodies because it's so painful. And so some of the work of recovery is helping people to be able to sit with their body just a little bit at a time and kind of getting to the point where they can feel their body sensation, because your body is the spidey sense that you need to, we use it all the time in the world. We were talking about this morning. Neuroception, we're all kind of pinging off each other. And if you're kind of switching off the sensations of your body because they're traumatized, then you do lose a lot of your ability to communicate and bond with people. So it really helps for communicating and bonding to be able to retrieve that. So that's some of the work that I think is really exciting. That's going on. Meaningful illness. That's right, Brian Broom. That's some of the work that I think is really interesting, and I think it's really amazing because when I look at drama therapy is kind of using the idea of personas as sort of healing metaphorical devices. Dance and movement therapy is using the idea of reintroducing or introducing movement, for the body to find a place of comfort and kind of explore woundedness through that. And it seems like it's the importance of it is becoming more and more understood. But it's certainly been around a long time. And from what I've heard of osteopaths talking, and I don't have a huge sample size, but two of my favorites are right here. That's really the ground of osteopathy, is that kind of, spirit work and whatever it's called in medicine. But it's really bringing that back in, that the spirit of the body and the spirit of, and exploring sensation in a safe way, and being able to tolerate those feelings and reintegrate that.
Should we take a moment and work on your back before we take a break and then move into the heart meditation?
Sure.
Okay. So let me move the camera.
I will pause my thing.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm just, it also reminded me, the idea of unstoried trauma reminded me of when we talked, when Eduardo Duran came and talked about and mentioned, don't let your suffering go to waste. So I was interested in making that connect, like that kind of, the idea of unstoried trauma connected me back to what he said in an earlier lecture. So thank you for that.
There we go. Yeah, I think Eduardo really got to the idea of like make meaning out of your suffering, make your suffering meaningful. And that was really Brian Broom's book is about how there's meaning in illness, and if we can find it, people can get better. They can get mo better, mo faster if we can find the meaning, that it has to offer them. So I'm going to finish up the demonstration part with Barb's back. Hi, Barb's back. And we established earlier in the day that Barb has a marvelous character named Scruffy Rabbit. What?
Scrawny.
Scrawny Rabbit. Yeah. And so Scrawny Rabbit can't be bothered to take care of herself because she's so busy digging up carrots for other people. I'm simplifying it now. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if we're going to find any characters in your back, but they may be there. And let's see. So I'm just feeling her back, and I'm just feeling um, where are the high points and the low points in an energetic sense. And I'm feeling a lot of stuff, to use a highly technical term. I'm feeling a lot of stuff here in the mid back. And so I'm taking my thumb and I'm rubbing these paraspinous muscles. We're trying to find the center of the stuff so I can rub it out, rub it down. And these muscles are tough muscles, so you can also use the forearm technique. Unless somebody hits you for using the forearm. But you get a lot more scrunchies that way. Scrunchy is another highly technical term that refers to the sound that the body makes when stuff is rubbed out of it. I don't know if you have a better way to describe it, Josie.
Is that crepitin? Not sure what. I'm not so sure that's a better word, but is that what you?
Probably
Yeah.
that's the more technical word. It's both a feeling and a sound.
Rice Krispies.
Yeah, Rice Krispies. That's a good description. If we had a more sensitive microphone, you could hear it. Here, I'll put the microphone next to.
I can mostly just hear fabric.
You guys hear it?
I just hear fabric, I think.
Oh well, just static. Probably need a better microphone. Oh, now we're getting down to the core when we start to hear ow, 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 ow.
Ow, ow.
Yeah, we're getting below the scrunchies.
And that's probably some of the old stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, somebody wants to be
while.
let in, so let me just click to let them in. Maybe somebody got knocked off. Philip. Yeah. Maybe the old stuff. Are there any characters in here that jump out? Got any residents in your back? Yowzers.
The last few days I've been renting my back out to Bob Fosse.
I thought he was dead.
Yeah, he is dead.
His spirit has been occupying your back.
And right foot.
Ah, so Bob Fosse's been.
Bob Fosse's muse.
So do you think Bob Fosse had chronic back pain? Absolutely.
Probably.
Yeah.
He certainly has a drinking problem,
Yeah.
and a pill problem, and a few other drugs probably.
Well,
Maybe
there
it
you
was
go.
pain related.
Okay, so maybe you've been overdoing Bob Fosse's
Yes.
back maneuvers. Hey Bob, get out of there. Listen up, Bob.
He was a great choreographer, though.
Yeah. Barb's saying it might be too late for her to become a professional jazz dancer. Oh well, so it goes. It's too late for me to become an astrophysicist too. You know, life is full of regrets.
I'll struggle through somehow. It's been a fun few days trying.
Yeah, yeah. It's that Fosse shoulder stuff that's really got you. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I'll try not to be too rough here. I'll look bad on TV if I am. You see how you can't. This is the reality of this work is you can't like start on the back and not go somewhere else, not get to the scapula and the shoulders, and it's just not possible. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. I'm moving her arm and I've got my fingers in the scapula, loosening it up. Just really pretty similar to what Josie was doing with Nick. Do do do. We should have put you at the other end of the table where the head thing is. Yeah. Do 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 do.
I think it's worth seeing, and maybe you covered it this morning or talked a little bit about it. I mean, it's nice to. I think what's kind of especially nice about the Cherokee bodywork in the way that we've been taught, and hopefully osteopathy sometimes, is that when you can, what's the best way to say it? Like, kind of, you're like, in a certain way, kind of noodling around without a lot of focused attention upon what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you're also kind of employing that spirit with the conversation that you have,
Right.
there's like
Right.
a lightness, and it's a sometimes difficult line to walk because people are coming to you. It might be easier if you're just friends, because I feel like I've had some of the best sessions with like Josie, and Tanya's another friend of ours who's not an osteopath, but when we work on each other, one of us might be in quite a bit of pain, but we can kind of noodle around and bring some lightness to the conversation and follow the energy of the conversation, and like things will come up like Bob Fosse, like like that's kind of random, but maybe that goes somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes the sort of roles that have been created for um, the whole doctor-patient thing interfere with the work. Because people don't expect you to be playful. They
Yeah.
expect you to be serious.
Yeah. So serious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that kind of sucks.
It really does.
Yeah, yeah.
But on the occasions where somebody's willing to kind of go with you, or
Mhm.
just by virtue of the nature of the session, or maybe you've just known them for long enough, they trust you, or I'm not sure what it is, but those tend to be some of the most fruitful times. Maybe Judy can speak to that. Judy, is it Judy?
Yeah. All right. Well, um,
Joyce.
I think we've
I'm
shown a
sorry.
lot of stuff, what we can. Um, I sort of need a break for water and other things. So what if we take a 10-minute break and then um, come back, and Barbara's going to do body scan and heart meditation. If she can wake up. I think you can wake up. How's your back? Was that fun? We didn't do it very long, but oh, all right. All right, so I'll put us on mute for about 10 minutes and we
Has
can.
Bob Fosse been extracted?
Not entirely, but some of the effects of him have been removed, I think. He's, yeah, he lingers. He has a lasting impression upon muscles.
Yes, he does.
So who's here? Joyce, Nicole. Oh, it is muted. Why don't, you can just turn it off.
Okay. There.
Here we go. So, hi. Sorry about that. We had a weird intrusion. It took us a while to get the sound turned off. And I just wanted to do a little work with you guys with a little bit of a scan and then a meditation to just look at the different landscapes. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and get comfortable and just be able to get into a position where you can breathe comfortably. It is the evening. You may fall asleep. Oh, that really hurt. I need to move this out of the way. Sorry, you may fall asleep. And you're welcome to do that. And the first thing I'm going to invite you to do is to take a slow, deep breath. And most of you are probably familiar with slow, deep breaths. Some of you probably do breathing exercises. And these days we're invited to breathe in for 4, hold for 2, out for 4, in for 6, hold for 2, out for 4. We're invited to come up with patterns of breathing that help us to really feel the insides of ourselves. So I invite you to experiment with breathing in whatever way that strikes you, and to be able to just settle into a nice rhythm. Because when you breathe, when you do that, when you breathe in slowly and out slowly, you're allowing your body to calm, and you're allowing your heart rate to become regulated. You connect your vagus nerve. You allow for the communication between the mind, heart, gut, that is the vagal connection. We know so much now about our hearts, and so much more about what our capacities are. We know that our minds have electrical fields, that our hearts have electrical fields that overpower our minds. We know that trees have electrical fields that can overpower our hearts. They entrain them and bring them into a rhythm. And we know that when we breathe slowly and deeply, and we're actually beginning a healing process. When we breathe slowly and deeply, we're allowing our autonomic nervous system to kick in, our sympathetic nervous system to stand down. We start cellular repair and restoration and communication. Just like when we massage certain points and release blocks, we're allowing communication between the muscles and through the fascia. And we're letting ourselves flow. And sometimes we have hesitations about that communication. Sometimes we're not actually sure that we want parts of our body talking to each other, especially if we're coming from a situation of trauma. So that's what we're going to think about tonight, but what we're going to explore is just relaxation and just getting that feeling of working in our inner minds and understanding introspection, interoception and exteroception and proprioception. So we're aware of the insides of ourselves and we're aware of the outsides of ourselves and we're aware of our movements in space. So just while you're breathing and allowing yourself the repair and restoration and feeling your autonomic nervous system, keeping your heart beating, I'm going to invite you to start with the external sounds that you hear. Maybe there's water running, floors creaking, cars going by, and just sort of allow those sounds to flow around you and let you feel where you are in the context of the soundscape that's around. Let you feel your place in that energy that the sounds are creating. Maybe there's smells, all of your senses. Maybe you're tasting things, maybe you've just had dinner. Maybe you're hearing things, maybe you're seeing things. A daughter, a kitten, a fire, stars. Just locate yourself in the context of your senses. Where are you in relationship to the moon? Where are you in relationship to the trees, to the road, to the touch of a loved one's hand, especially in these COVID days? What do your feet feel underneath the soles? What are you touching with your legs in your chair? What are you leaning on? What can your hands feel underneath them? And then I'm going to invite you to travel inside and begin to look around inside your body and listen around inside your body and feel around inside your body. Where does it feel like the muscles and the bones of the neck are? Where does it feel like the bones and muscles and fascia of the shoulders are? Are they suspended in space? What is their relationship? The inside to the outside? How are they held by the space around them? Do you feel your head floating on your neck? Do you feel your head a burden, supported? When you go down your back, do you feel the signals up and down your spinal cord, spreading out into your extremities? Do you feel your brain going down the spinal cord, sending signals and emerging in the fingertips? Do you feel your back and your pelvis upright, your back balanced? Are your legs pinched? And can you, with your mind, soothe the muscles? Allow them to feel energy moving through them. Can you feel the energy inside your feet? your knees, your calves, your shins. Let's start at the bottom, at the feet. Those wonderful legs that carry us. Experience the beauty of being able to shift your weight. Even if they're tired and they've carried you for a long time, just let yourself feel your legs and offer them your gratitude. Offer your toes your gratitude for the way they walk in sand or water or mud, keeping us upright. Just welcome your legs. Welcome your back, moving you, bending, stretching, flexing, carrying, holding. Offer your back gratitude. Your neck and shoulders. Offer them gratitude. Carrying the weight of worries. Looking, turning, surveilling, gazing. Understanding. And then imagine coming out from behind the cranium and going down the side of your spine, that vagus nerve that wraps around your gut. That one that everybody's talking about these days, vagal tone, polyvagal theory. The signal system that helps you feel whether you're safe or not. Keeping it in tune, the system that we can activate. We can allow the feelings of safety to flow through us, or we can elevate to a state of watchfulness or to a state of protection as needed. So just let yourself imagine the feeling of the signals going down your spine and around your belly. And we know that the vagus nerve connects your brain and your head, goes down through your heart, and then wraps around the belly. And we know that there are neurons in both your belly and your heart. We know that the heart has its own capacity to make certain limited decisions, and that the belly has the capacity to make certain limited decisions, and that both of them have the capacity to offer information, to offer evaluation of a situation. Your heart can give you feedback as part of your neuroception, they call it now. Your belly, your heart, your mind, acting independently and together. And that's the system that we're interested in today. And just for today, we thought we'd have a look at the heart part. Since it's the evening, since it's coming up for a holiday time when love is a very good option. Sending love, allowing yourself to feel love, finding companionship, especially in this time when we're stopped from accessing our usual ways of self-consolation that we do at this time of year. Once upon a time when I first met Lewis, I was supporting him to do a Hamblecha vision quest. He was going to go and sit out with a circle of prayer ties around him just for a couple of nights so that he could say his prayers and connect with the spirits to be ready for ceremony. So they lit a fire and they invited people to come into a lodge, and they did 2 rounds, the first 2 rounds of the lodge, and then they took all the guys or women who were going to go sit out, and they took them to their spots and set up the prayer ties around them. I was Lewis's supporter, and I'd never done that before, and they told me that because I was supporting him, I would feel the things he was feeling when he was out there, and I would be hungry for the things that he was hungry for and thirsty for the things that he was thirsty for. And they said that I could sit by the fire and keep vigil, and that I could connect with him through the fire. And the fire they light, because it's like saying that there's a heart here, a community heart right here, waiting for you when you come back, and knowing that you're there and holding you while you're out. So I was sitting by the fire, and I was aware of a quite pleasant sensation of wanting cigars and a cup of coffee for Lewis, who was out in a forest in a little bit of a wood surrounded by prayer ties. And one of the elders came down and he said he had gathered that there was a heart connection between Lewis and I. And he said, it's good to be thinking about what your heart wants, he said. He said, hearts are often misunderstood. He said, we say things like someone stole our heart, or we gave our heart away, but he said, you can't do it. Even if hearts are kind of pesky and make us feel uncomfortable sometimes, Creator knew that we would try to get rid of them, and so made it so that we couldn't do that. So he said, your heart is your companion on the road movie of life. See, we're spirit beings who come to earth to walk in a human body. And when we're on the earth, we have incredible experiences, and some of them make us go, what was I thinking? Coming to walk this human walk. And we cry out for help and support from the spirit world. And he said, just before you come down to earth and are born into a human life, Creator introduces you to your heart spirit, your companion on the road movie of life. And your heart goes with you from the minute you quicken until the minute you die. And we can't give our hearts away because they'd just be meat. And somebody can't steal them because the same thing would happen. They're no use to anyone but us. What we can do, he said, is we can invite our hearts to show how big and red and gold they can be, how big their energy circle is, and we can invite people to come and sit in that circle. We can share the energy and the light and the love in our hearts. And we can encourage them to grow their own hearts. And we can, when you found a good companion, he said, when your heart doesn't feel like it has to shrink or hide from itself, when your heart can be its fullest, brightest, reddest self. You can play and feel delight and joy. And he said, it's good to get to know your heart, because a lot of life is about negotiating with your heart to find a situation that's agreeable to everybody, because sometimes our hearts are impulsive and we need to rein them in. We need to keep our hearts safe. So I invite you now to invite the spirit of your heart to come and sit with you. Maybe put your heart on automatic for a minute and come and maybe there's a place you go in your mind that's beautiful, a medicine place. Sometimes I like to think about the first place that I ever knew there was medicine when I was little. It's kind of a strange place. It was underneath the pier, but there was something about the smell and the sight and the moon that made me feel like something magic was in the world and that I believed it. Maybe you have a place and maybe you want to go to that place in your mind. And invite your heart to come and sit with you and hang out with you. So I'm going to let you have a little conversation with your heart, and maybe you guys have to talk over some heavy stuff. Maybe you have to be reminded that hearts forgive and love. And sure, a heart can be broken, but just like in Japan, there's a tradition where if a pot breaks, we paint the break with gold to celebrate the wisdom that it acquires from being broken. Same thing with our hearts. If our hearts are broken, we paint the break with gold. We allow the heart to shine with the wisdom from being broken. Hearts heal and they keep loving. So I'm going to sing a song, and the song is Tankashla. It's you and me here together, looking for health, looking for healing. And I'll sing it 4 times, once for each of the 4 directions, while you have a conversation with your heart. Tankashla, Tankashla, Heyawa uelo. Mitakuye o bonikte lo yo heyawa uelo. Tankashla yo, Tankashla yo, Heyawa uelo. Mitakuye o bonite lo yo heyawa uelo. Tankashla yo, Tankashla yo, heyawa uelo. Mitakuye o bonite lo yo heyawa uelo. Tankashla yo, Tankashla yo, heyawa uelo. Mitakuye o bonite lo yo heyawa uelo. So you can ignore me while I keep talking, and you can check in with your heart. Keep talking. And I'll just carry on, sing a couple more things. It's good to know who you want to sit next to you in your heart space. Maybe there's people you want on the edges of your heart circle. Maybe there's other people you want closer. Where do you seat people in and around the energy of your heart? Maybe you can explore your heart's energy touching other parts of your body. How do they feel about the energy of the heart? Do some find it intrusive? Do some find it the most welcoming thing they've ever felt? It's good to get a gauge. How close can your heart go to your gut? Just feel the energy that your heart has. Think of the people in your life and who you'd like to offer some energy to. Who do you want to send that energy out to right now? The Buddhists do metta meditation. They recognize that all beings want to feel loved and be loved and to love, and they invite them to send energy with the heart to all beings. Where are you in that? Can you send energy to your family, to the people you love? Can you imagine the energy of your heart traveling out to greet them? Just imagine the flow of that energy. I was once at a healing gathering and an elder said to me, if you don't know what to do, just let your heart's energy flow. Touch the people around you. Seemed pretty good advice. How are you doing with letting your heart's energy flow? Shaping the energy that comes off you. All these explorations are there to be done. So I invite you to take a moment and listen again to the interior of yourself. Imagine your brain, your frontal cortex, the signaling system. Imagine how it signals when it's signaling love, how it signals when it's signaling acceptance. How is that different? We can practice shifting the energy that we put in to the way we comprehend the world. Rigor, we can experiment with flooding ourselves with love or flooding ourselves with suspicion or intelligence. But for now, we'll work on love. And in a minute, I'm going to invite you to wander back into the exteroception, to the external world, to hearing the sounds, feeling the feelings, the floor around you, letting your senses explore the realm outside that locates you within it. There was a poet who said that our bodies are the way we are found. They're a somewhat arbitrary gathering of molecules. If we have quantum physics right there, a momentary instantiation in space and time. They're the way somebody finds us. Gives them a hand to hold. So feel your body in space and the external surroundings, the sounds. And begin to bring yourself more into that awareness. Feel the chair you're sitting in, the clothes you're wearing, the sounds from outside, the light. And wriggle your fingers and toes. And when you're ready, turn to your heart and invite them to stay with you, to jump back in and continue their walk. And maybe you're going to make some renewed promises to each other. Maybe you'll agree to check in anytime you guys feel like you need to. Tell your heart that you'll check in more often. And then bring yourself back all the way into the room. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Does anybody have any comments or reflections or thoughts or outbursts, whispers, mutterings? Where's Lewis? I think Lewis might have disappeared.
Hi, it's Nicole.
Hi.
I really enjoyed that. I think I fell asleep for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just something when we get into that deep state of relaxation that I don't know how to describe it other than that floating feeling that I get, where I don't even feel like the pressure of my body, like my body on the chair, or, it's just kind of made me feel like I was in like a sack floating around. So it was really, yeah, and I feel like that's just, I don't really have words to, like, that's just part of maybe that kind of feeling like secure and maybe like suspended. I don't know. Yeah, there's just something there that I really appreciated. So thank you.
Great. Anybody else?
There he is.
Here I am. I'm preparing to give a talk in Kuala Lumpur.
Kuala Lumpur.
Indeed. Where it's Saturday morning, where we should have been if COVID had not hit.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So do you have some thoughts, some final
Well, I thought
we're a little bit early, but
many have left due to the lateness of the hour.
yeah.
And my only thought is that we didn't get any Australians. They were the ones that asked that we do it at this time. But I had fun today. I mean, I thought it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I think we have some useful videotapes that people can, well, recordings, they don't call them videotapes anymore. Recordings, enregistrement, that people can watch.
And we'll put those up.
Yeah.
And, we hope that one day people can come and do a Cherokee Bodywork. One of my favorite places is Row, the retreat center that's sponsoring some of the classes that we're doing, but it's a great gathering place and very good for the heart is Row. So hopefully at some point we'll get back to being able to do things together. Oh, there's Ryan. Morning, Ryan.
We'll get back. We'll be able to touch each other again.
Yeah,
outside of our personal
outside
bubble.
of our, yeah.
That'll be fun.
And we do this kind of stuff, so we'll keep you on the mailing list because we're always doing fun, weird little classes, and we tend to have a sliding scale, so we just like people.
It usually slides pretty well.
It slides pretty far down.
All right. Well,
So,
I think it's good night.
yeah. Does anybody have any last words, final thoughts, next steps?
I just want to say thank you so much. I enjoyed both classes. I got a lot out of it, and I'm just very grateful. And I didn't have to drive anywhere. Yay!
Yeah.
Well, it's really good to see you. And the thing about all this stuff is you can do this at home. If you just think about,
as Joyce has shown in her basement.
Yes, you can do it at home alone in your basement. And the more you,
a minute.
Here, do you want to sing a quick song?
Oh yeah.
So we'll sing a very quick thank you song.
Okay.
Sheila.
Wait, which one are we singing?
Tunka
Sheila pila maya ye, pila maya ye, pila maya ye lo he. We chose aniwa maya kucha, pila maya ye lo he. Tunka Sheila pila maya ye, pila maya ye, pila maya ye lo he. We chose aniwa maya kucha, pila maya ye lo he.
So if you have any afterthoughts, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We love to have conversations with people and learn your experiences and know how you use the work and stuff like that. So arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Night.
Thank you very much. Night, everybody.
Night. All right.